The style of attack that we saw take place in France yesterday is something that we have seen groups wanting to do for some time. The Mumbai attacks of 2008 were seen as a hugely successful operation that attracted a lot of attention to the group Lashkar-e-Taiba and its struggle. And since that success, we've seen Al-Qaeda and other groups try to emulate it. This particular attack in France is one that comes on top of a threat picture that is already very elevated. We have the threat of people who are going to Syria and Iraq, some of whom will come back with sort of intention to launch some sort of attack. When we're looking at the fact that we're talking about thousands who have gone from Europe, you're dealing with a very large community of people that are of concern to security services. On top of that, we've also seen an increase in the sort of lone actor style of attack, where you have individuals who aren't necessarily affiliated with any group or associated with any group deciding to launch an attack sort of in advance of what they understand as a global message and a global struggle. I think that the fact of this sort of attack coming on top of all of that will only serve to further increase security services concerns. I think we had started to see a change in terms of the hardening of security around certain targets going back to Remembrance Day of last year. Police here in the United Kingdom disrupted a plot which appeared to be individuals who were going to target off-duty, were going to target security officials in some way around the sort of celebrations. After that, we've seen armed response units or police with guns near some of these more prominent targets, clearly to protect them. I think in the wake of this incident, security forces will be looking again at the places that they have some of these armed response units and police based to make sure that they're covering sort of the right spread of potential targets. In some ways, one of the advantages this country has when we're looking at these sorts of attacks is it's actually quite difficult to get this sort of weaponry easily here in the United Kingdom. If we go back and look at the 2013 attack of the two individuals in Woolwich who brutally butchered the off-duty soldier Lee Rigby, they used knives. They had also got their hands on a gun, but it was an antique, that it wasn't even clear if it actually worked. Those seem to be the sorts of guns that people can get access to. It is quite hard to get access to guns here. In contrast, on the continent in France or in other European countries, the sort of free movement that is enabled by the Schengen zone and the European Union means that it's much easier to cross borders, and some countries have slightly looser or have different gun laws to others. I think what we will probably see in the wake of this particular incident is a return to some of the questions we saw around Woolwich, and which came up most recently in the Woolwich report late last year by the ISC. And that's the question of what do you do with persistent radical individuals? These are individuals who sort of bump along in security services radars and of concern for long periods of time, but never seem to cross that threshold of moving into action. I think the fact that the sort of attack planning model has now gone so low tech, and so the sorts of targets that can be aimed at are so broad potentially, that means that I think security services are going to be really looking at an awful lot of people who are sort of in that category. The problem is that it's possible that that pool is quite large, and security services resources are quite limited. And it's a question of how do you make sure you're allocating the right amounts of resources to deal with some of these sort of persistent, long-term radicalized individuals. Because as we've seen now, these guys can go almost 10 years being involved in radical activity before they decide to carry out their act.